The first signal came on a Tuesday morning at 0347 Greenwich Mean Time. Dr. Sarah Chun was 3 hours into her shift at the Deep Space Communications Array in New Mexico when every screen in the facility lit up like Christmas morning. The coffee in her hand went cold as she stared at the impossible readings streaming across her monitors. "This can't be right," she whispered, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she ran diagnostic after diagnostic. Each test came back the same. The signal was real, it was artificial, and it was coming from beyond the solar system. Sarah's supervisor, Director Marcus Webb, arrived within 20 minutes of her emergency call. His usually perfect tie hung loose around his neck, and his gray hair stuck up at odd angles. He'd clearly rushed from his home across town. "Show me what we've got," Marcus said, not bothering with pleasantries. Sarah pulled up the signal analysis on the main screen. The waveform pulsed in perfect mathematical sequences, too precise to be natural, too complex to be accidental. It's definitely artificial. The pattern suggests intelligence, but it's unlike anything in our databases. The source appears to be approximately 47 light-years away, originating from the TRAPPIST-1 system. Marcus leaned closer to the screen, his weathered face illuminated by the dancing lights of the signal. "How long have they been transmitting?" "Based on the signal strength and our detection capabilities, I'd estimate they started broadcasting this approximately 3 months ago." "But, Marcus, there's something else." Sarah's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "The signal isn't random. It's a countdown." The director's face went pale. "A countdown to what?" "I don't know yet. But if my calculations are correct, it reaches 0 in 72 hours. Within 6 hours, every major space agency on Earth had been notified. The European Space Agency, NASA, Roscosmos, the Chinese National Space Administration, and a dozen smaller organizations all confirmed the signal independently. What had started as Sarah's discovery in a lonely facility in New Mexico had become humanity's first confirmed contact with extraterrestrial intelligence. The President of the United States was briefed at dawn. The Chinese premier received his update during his afternoon tea. The Russian president was informed while reviewing naval exercises in the Baltic. Each leader received the same message: "We are not alone, and something is coming." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the world's leading xenolinguist, arrived at the New Mexico facility on Wednesday evening. She was a small woman with kind eyes and an intellect that had unraveled the mysteries of ancient languages that had puzzled scholars for centuries. If anyone could decode an alien message, it would be her. "The mathematical foundation is elegant," Elena said as she studied the signal patterns. "Base, 16 numerical system, which suggests they have 16 digits or appendages. The countdown is definitely intentional, but there are subsignals embedded within the main transmission." Sarah watched as Elena worked through the night, her dark eyes never leaving the scrolling data. Coffee cups multiplied around the linguist's workstation like archaeological layers marking the passage of time. "I think I've got something," Elena announced as the sun rose on Thursday morning. Her voice was hoarse from hours of concentration. "The subsignals aren't random. They're coordinates." Marcus, who had been catching brief naps on the facility's couch, snapped awake. "Coordinates to what?" "Earth. They're broadcasting Earth's exact location in the galaxy, down to our position in the solar system. But here's the strange part. They're also broadcasting coordinates for 27 other star systems." The implications hit the room like a physical blow. Sarah felt her stomach drop. "They know where we are. They know about other civilizations. And they're counting down to something." Elena nodded grimly. "There's more. I've identified what appears to be a language pattern in the deeper layers of the transmission. It's going to take time to decode, but the syntax suggests warnings or advisories." The next 18 hours passed in a blur of activity. The facility transformed from a quiet research station into the nerve center of humanity's first contact protocols. Military liaisons arrived with encrypted communication equipment. Scientists from around the world appeared via secure video links. The world's most powerful telescopes turned their attention to the TRAPPIST-1 system, searching for any sign of the signal's source. Dr. James Crawford, a physicist from MIT, joined the growing team on Friday morning. He was young for his reputation, barely 35, but His work on theoretical faster-than-light communication had earned him recognition in scientific circles worldwide. The energy requirements for this transmission are staggering, James explained as he reviewed the signal data. To broadcast with this clarity across 47 light-years would require power generation capabilities that dwarf anything we can imagine. We're talking about the energy output of a small star. Sarah looked up from her analysis station. You're saying whoever sent this has access to stellar-level energy? I'm saying whoever sent this has moved beyond anything we understand about civilization. This isn't just advanced technology. This is a fundamental mastery over physics that we can barely comprehend. The countdown continued its relentless march toward zero. 36 hours. 24 hours. 12 hours. Elena had managed to decode fragments of the embedded language by Friday evening. What she found changed everything. It's a warning system, she announced to the assembled team. Her face was drawn with exhaustion, but her eyes burned with the intensity of discovery. The transmission is essentially a galactic emergency broadcast, but it's not warning us about them. It's warning them about us. The room fell silent. Outside, the New Mexico desert stretched endlessly under a canopy of stars that no longer seemed quite so peaceful. Marcus was the first to speak. Warning them about us? What does that mean? Elena pulled up her translation on the main screen. The alien symbols looked like a cross between mathematical equations and artistic flourishes, but her English translation appeared below in stark, simple text. Attention all civilizations in the Galactic Monitoring Network. Species designation 7834. Sol. 3 has achieved nuclear capability while maintaining planetary warfare characteristics. Classification: dangerous primitive. Recommendation: quarantine until evolution or extinction event. Warning: species exhibits extreme territorial aggression, rapid technological advancement, and unpredictable behavioral patterns. Approach with extreme caution. The weight of those words settled over the team like a shroud. Humanity wasn't being welcomed to a galactic community. They were being marked as a threat. Sarah stared at the translation, her mind reeling. They think we're dangerous. More than that, Elena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I've decoded more of the message. This isn't just a warning about humanity. It's a formal notification to something called the Galactic Quarantine Authority. In 6 hours, when the countdown reaches zero, they're going to activate a containment protocol around our solar system. James leaned forward, his face pale. What kind of containment protocol? Elena's hands shook slightly as she pulled up the next section of her translation. They're going to surround our solar system with what they call barrier nodes. Nothing gets in, nothing gets out. They're going to lock us away from the rest of the galaxy until we either evolve beyond our aggressive tendencies or destroy ourselves. The room erupted in voices as the implications sank in. Humanity was about to be imprisoned in their own solar system by civilizations so advanced that they could manipulate stellar energy like humans manipulated electricity. Marcus raised his hand for silence. How long do we have? Elena checked her chronometer. 5 hours and 37 minutes. Then, we need to send a response. If they think we're nothing but violent primitives, we need to show them they're wrong. Sarah looked around the room at the assembled scientists, linguists, and military personnel. But are they wrong? Look at our history. Look at our present. We've been fighting wars since we learned to make fire. We've built weapons that could destroy our entire planet. Maybe they're right to be afraid of us. Dr. Crawford shook his head. We're more than our worst impulses. We're the species that created music and poetry. We've built art that moves people to tears and philosophy that explores the deepest questions of existence. We've reached into space despite every rational reason to stay safely on our planet. We're dangerous, yes, but we're also capable of incredible beauty and growth. Elena was already working on a response transmission. I can use their communication protocol to send a message back. But what do we say? How do we convince a galactic civilization that humanity deserves a chance? The countdown ticked steadily downward. For hours, 3 hours, 2 hours. As the deadline approached, the team worked frantically to craft humanity's first message to the galaxy. It needed to be perfect. It needed to show the best of what humans could be while acknowledging the legitimate concerns about their violent tendencies. Sarah found herself thinking about her daughter, sleeping peacefully in her bed 2,000 miles away. What kind of world would she wake up to? Would she live her entire life trapped in a solar system prison, never knowing the wonders that lay beyond the stars? The message they finally crafted was both an apology and a plea. It acknowledged humanity's violent history while showcasing their capacity for growth, learning, and love. They included mathematical proofs, samples of human art and music, and detailed documentation of their efforts toward peace and cooperation. But as the countdown entered its final hour, a new signal appeared on their screens. This one was different, closer, stronger, and coming from within the solar system itself. "There's something out there," Sarah whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of terror and wonder. "Something big." Elena's face went white as she processed the new signal. "It's not a ship. It's a structure. And it's activating." The countdown reached its final minutes, and humanity held its breath, waiting to discover what their future would hold. In the vast emptiness of space, ancient machines older than human civilization began to stir, preparing to either welcome Earth into the galactic community or lock them away forever. The warning had been issued. The response had been sent. Now all that remained was to wait and see whether humanity would be judged worthy of freedom among the stars or condemned to isolation until they could prove they deserved better. As the final seconds ticked away, Dr. Sarah Chun realized that Tuesday morning felt like a lifetime ago. The universe had become a much larger, more dangerous, and more wonderful place. The only question now was whether humanity would be allowed to explore it, or spend the rest of their existence gazing at the stars from behind an invisible prison wall. The structure that appeared on their sensors defied every law of physics Sarah thought she understood. It materialized in the space between Earth and Mars like a flower blooming in fast motion, unfolding layers of crystalline geometry that stretched across thousands of kilometers. The barrier node, as Elena had translated it, was beautiful in the way that glaciers were beautiful, magnificent, alien, and absolutely terrifying. "Power readings are off the charts," James reported, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Whatever this thing is, it's drawing energy directly from the solar wind. It's essentially feeding off our sun." Director Webb stood transfixed before the main display, watching as humanity's prison walls rose around them. "Any response to our transmission?" Elena shook her head, her fingers still dancing across the communication array controls. "Nothing. Either they haven't received it yet, or they're choosing to ignore us." The barrier node continued its expansion, creating a latticework of energy that would eventually encompass the entire solar system. Similar structures were appearing throughout the outer reaches, each one taking position like sentinels around humanity's cosmic neighborhood. "Sir," one of the military liaisons interrupted, his face grim as he read from a secure tablet. "We're getting reports from observatories worldwide. The structures are appearing everywhere. Sydney reports 3 nodes visible from Earth. Moscow confirms barrier construction beyond Jupiter's orbit. This isn't just a blockade. They're building a cage." Sarah felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. The magnitude of what was happening hit her like a physical blow. Every human who had ever dreamed of reaching the stars, every child who had looked up at the night sky and wondered about the worlds beyond, every scientist who had dedicated their life to understanding the universe, all of them were about to be cut off from the infinite possibilities that lay beyond their own solar system. But then, the unexpected happened. A new signal appeared on their screens, but this one wasn't coming from the TRAPPIST-1 system. It was broadcasting from somewhere much closer, somewhere within the solar system itself. The signal was clean, powerful, and unmistakably artificial. "Are you tracking this?" Sarah called out to Elena, who was already working to decode the new transmission. "It's using the same communication protocol as the Galactic Network," Elena confirmed, her excitement barely contained. "But the signal strength suggests it's originating from somewhere nearby. Very nearby." James was running calculations on his workstation, cross-referencing the signal's origin point with known objects in the solar system. According to this, the transmission is coming from the asteroid belt. Specifically, from an asteroid designated 2087 Bravo that we've been monitoring for the past 15 years. "That's impossible," Sarah protested. "We've had eyes on that rock for over a decade. It's just a standard iron-nickel asteroid. Nothing special about it." Except that it's not broadcasting like one, Elena said, her voice filled with growing wonder. And I'm starting to decode the message. It's addressed to Earth. The room fell silent as Elena worked through the alien language patterns they'd learned to recognize over the past 3 days. The translation appeared on the main screen in fragments, each new line adding to an impossible revelation. Greetings, children of Soul 3. I am Keeper Zaranine of the Meridian Collective. I have been assigned to monitor your species' development for the past 400 of your years. The Quarantine Authority's actions today were not unexpected, but they are premature. Sarah's world tilted on its axis. 400 years? There's been an alien observer watching us for 400 years. Elena continued translating, her voice growing stronger with each line. Your species has indeed demonstrated concerning aggressive tendencies, as documented by the Galactic Monitoring Network. However, you have also shown remarkable capacity for growth, adaptation, and what you term moral evolution. The Quarantine Authority's assessment fails to account for your potential. James was staring at the asteroid tracking data, his mind struggling to process the implications. An observer, hidden in plain sight for 4 centuries. How is that possible? I have witnessed your renaissance, your enlightenment, your scientific revolution. I have observed your wars and your peace treaties, your genocides, and your humanitarian movements. You are a species in transition, balanced on the knife's edge between destruction and transcendence. Marcus found his voice first. Can we respond to this? Keeper, Elena was already working on a response protocol. I think so. The signal is strong and clear. If I can match their communication frequency. Her fingers flew across the controls. There. We have an open channel. Sarah stepped forward, suddenly, aware that she was about to participate in humanity's first real-time conversation with an extraterrestrial intelligence. What do we say? The truth, Marcus decided. Keeper Zaranine, this is Director Marcus Webb of the Deep Space Communications Array. We are honored by your contact and grateful for your observation of our species. Can you tell us more about the quarantine process? Is there any way to prevent it? The response came back within minutes, fast enough to confirm that the observer was indeed broadcasting from within the solar system. Director Webb, your species has progressed remarkably in the past century. The establishment of international law, the development of global communication networks, your first tentative steps into space exploration, these are positive indicators. However, the Quarantine Authority operates on strict protocols established over millions of years. They have contained 17 civilizations in your developmental stage. Elena's translation paused as more data streamed in. Of those 17 species, 4 evolved beyond their aggressive tendencies and were granted galactic citizenship within 10,000 of their years. 6 destroyed themselves through warfare or environmental collapse. 7 remain in quarantine, having achieved technological stability but not social evolution. The weight of those statistics settled over the team like a lead blanket. Humanity had a less than 25% chance of ever leaving their solar system. There is, however, a provision in the quarantine protocols. The message continued. The trial of merit. A contained species may request evaluation for early release if they can demonstrate significant evolutionary progress beyond their baseline assessment. Sarah leaned forward eagerly. What kind of demonstration? The trial consists of 3 challenges designed to test your species' growth beyond primitive aggression. First, you must demonstrate the ability to resolve conflicts through cooperation rather than violence. Second, you must show willingness to sacrifice individual or national benefit for the greater good of your species. Third, you must prove that you can extend empathy and assistance to those you perceive as different or inferior. James was taking notes as fast as he could write. How long do we have to prepare for this trial? The Quarantine Authority allows 1 standard galactic cycle for preparation. In your measurement, this equals approximately 57 of your years. However, I have been authorized to offer assistance in your preparation, should you choose to accept it. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline thrown to drowning sailors. Humanity had an advocate, someone who had watched their growth and believed in their potential. But the challenges ahead seemed insurmountable. Marcus looked around the room at his team, scientists, linguists, and military personnel who had stumbled into the most important conversation in human history. Keeper Zaranine, we gratefully accept your offer of assistance. What can you tell us about the other species that have faced this trial? The successful species shared common characteristics. They developed global governance systems that prioritized collective benefit over individual power. They established protocols for peaceful resolution of resource conflicts. Most importantly, they demonstrated the ability to see beyond their own immediate needs and consider the welfare of other species, including those less technologically advanced than themselves. Elena was furiously taking notes, recognizing the roadmap that was being laid out before them. What about the species that failed? What mistakes should we avoid? The failures typically resulted from inability to overcome tribal thinking on a planetary scale. Species that remained divided into competing nation-states or ideological factions consistently failed the cooperation trial. Those that continued to view violence as an acceptable solution to resource scarcity failed the sacrifice trial. Those that could not extend empathy beyond their own species failed the empathy trial. Sarah felt the crushing weight of history bearing down on her. These weren't just academic challenges. They were asking humanity to evolve beyond everything they had been for thousands of years. There is hope, the message continued, as if Keeper Zaranine could sense the growing despair in their responses. Your species has already begun this evolution naturally. Your development of international humanitarian law, your space exploration programs that require international cooperation, your growing environmental awareness. These are all positive indicators. James looked up from his calculations. Keeper, can you tell us more about yourself? About the Meridian Collective? We're trying to understand who we're dealing with. The Meridian Collective is an alliance of 47 species that have achieved post-scarcity civilization. We serve as observers and mentors for developing civilizations throughout this galactic sector. I am what you might term an anthropologist, specializing in species evolutionary patterns. My people achieved galactic citizenship approximately 12,000 years ago, after successfully completing our own trial of merit. The room fell quiet as everyone absorbed the incredible scope of what they were dealing with. 47 advanced civilizations, post-scarcity societies, 12,000 years of galactic citizenship. Humanity was an infant species taking its first steps in a universe full of ancient, wise neighbors. My assignment to monitor Sol 3 began during what you call your Renaissance period. Keeper Zaranine continued. I have watched your artistic development, your scientific breakthroughs, your social progress, and, yes, your wars and atrocities. You are a species of remarkable contradictions, capable of both breathtaking cruelty and extraordinary compassion. Elena finished translating another segment and looked up with tears in her eyes. They've been watching us create the Sistine Chapel and split the atom. They've seen us write symphonies and commit genocide. They've observed our capacity for both love and hate. The question now, the message concluded, is whether you can choose to emphasize your better nature over your baser instincts. The next 57 years will determine not just your access to the galaxy, but the survival of your species. The choice, as it has always been, is yours to make. The communication channel fell silent, leaving the assembled team alone with the weight of humanity's future resting on their shoulders. Outside, the barrier nodes continued their construction, creating an invisible cage around the solar system. But, for the first time since the countdown had begun, Sarah felt something she hadn't dared to feel before: hope. They had an ally. They had a chance. Most importantly, they had a clear path forward. The next 57 years would be the most important in human history, and it was up to them to make sure humanity was ready for the trial that would determine their fate among the stars. 27 years had passed since first contact, and the world Dr. Sarah Chun now inhabited bore little resemblance to the one she had known before that Tuesday morning in New Mexico. She stood in the observation deck of the Luna 3 research station, looking out at the Earth hanging like a blue jewel against the star-filled darkness, and marveled at how much humanity had changed. The Global Cooperation Initiative, born from the urgent need to prepare for the trial of merit, had transformed international relations. The old United Nations had evolved into something unprecedented, a true world government with meaningful authority over resource distribution, environmental protection, and conflict resolution. It hadn't been easy, and it hadn't been quick, but the alternative, eternal imprisonment in their solar system, had provided motivation like nothing in human history. Dr. Chun. A voice interrupted her contemplation. She turned to see Captain Elena Vasquez, the former linguist now serving as director of interspecies communication. Elena had aged gracefully, her dark hair now streaked with silver, but her eyes still burned with the same intellectual intensity that had decoded humanity's first alien message. Elena, Sarah smiled, gesturing toward the viewport. Just watching the sunrise over the Pacific. Hard to believe it's been almost 3 decades. Elena joined her at the observation window, both women comfortable in the low-gravity environment that had become their second home. Sometimes I still can't believe any of this is real. An alien observer hidden in our asteroid belt, galactic civilization, trials to prove our worth. It reads like science fiction. But it's working, isn't it? Sarah asked. The changes we've made, the progress we've achieved. Keeper Zaranine's guidance has been invaluable. Over the past 27 years, humanity had maintained regular contact with their assigned observer. Keeper Zaranine had provided crucial insights into galactic civilization while carefully avoiding any technology transfers that might violate the quarantine protocols. The guidance had been subtle but transformative, philosophical frameworks rather than technological solutions, examples of how other species had approached similar challenges rather than direct instruction. The preliminary assessments are encouraging, Elena agreed. Global conflict is at an all-time low. We've achieved carbon neutrality ahead of schedule. The resource distribution accords have eliminated extreme poverty in most regions. But, Sarah, I'm worried about the trial itself. Keeper Zaranine has been evasive about the specific details. Sarah nodded, sharing Elena's concern. They knew the trial would test cooperation, sacrifice, and empathy, but the exact nature of the challenges remained mysterious. Have you asked directly? Multiple times. The response is always the same. The trial must be faced without foreknowledge of its specific challenges. Preparation through understanding principles is acceptable. Preparation through advanced knowledge of specific situations would invalidate the assessment. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication from Earth. Sarah activated the holographic display, and the image of Dr. James Crawford appeared before them. Now in his early 60s, James served as the director of the Global Space Initiative, coordinating humanity's expanded presence throughout the solar system. Sarah, Elena. James's voice carried a note of excitement that made both women straighten with attention. We've received a communication from the Quarantine Authority. It's time. The message from the galactic bureaucracy was formal, clinical, and terrifying in its brevity. Humanity would face the trial of merit in 6 months. 3 challenges would be presented in sequence, each designed to test a specific aspect of species development. Success required passing all 3 trials. Failure meant permanent quarantine. Within hours, every major leader on Earth had been briefed. The president of the Global Federation, elected just 2 years earlier on a platform of trial preparation, called an emergency session of the World Council. Representatives from every continent, every major cultural group, and every significant scientific organization gathered in the rebuilt Geneva complex to plan humanity's response. Sarah found herself appointed to the Trial Preparation Committee, along with Elena, James, and 12 other individuals who had devoted their careers to understanding the challenge ahead. Their first meeting took place in a secure conference room beneath the lunar surface, protected from both terrestrial politics and potential extraterrestrial monitoring. Let's review what we know for certain, Elena began, calling up a holographic display of their accumulated data. 3 trials: cooperation, sacrifice, and empathy. No advanced knowledge of specific scenarios allowed. Assessment by galactic observers who have evaluated 16 previous species. For succeeded, 6 self-destructed, 7 remain in quarantine. Dr. Amara Okafor, a sociologist from the Nigerian Institute of Technology, raised her hand. Have we identified any patterns in the species that succeeded versus those that failed? James pulled up another display showing the limited information Keeper Zaranine had been authorized to share. The successful species shared several characteristics. First, they had developed beyond tribal thinking to true planetary consciousness. Second, they demonstrated willingness to make significant sacrifices for long-term benefit. Third, they showed genuine concern for the welfare of species they perceived as inferior. That third point troubles me, admitted Dr. Chen Weiming, a philosopher from the Beijing Academy of Sciences. How do we demonstrate empathy for inferior species when we don't know what species we'll encounter? Sarah had been wondering about that herself. Keeper Zaranine has hinted that the trials might involve simulated scenarios rather than actual encounters. But we can't be sure. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of preparation, but not the kind humanity might have expected. There were no weapons to build, no technologies to develop, no armies to train. Instead, they focused on something far more challenging, preparing to be the best version of themselves. Global meditation sessions were organized to help humanity center itself before the coming ordeal. Educational programs reinforced the principles of cooperation and empathy that had guided the past 27 years of development. Most importantly, humanity engaged in frank, sometimes painful discussions about their remaining flaws and blind spots. The process wasn't always smooth. Regional tensions still existed, despite the global government structure. Economic inequalities, while reduced, hadn't been completely eliminated. Cultural prejudices persisted in many areas. But rather than hiding these problems, humanity chose to confront them directly, seeing the approaching trial as an opportunity for growth rather than simply a test to pass. 1 month before the trial date, Keeper Zaranine made an unprecedented offer. Instead of their usual long-distance communication, the observer requested permission to approach Earth for a face-to-face meeting. The response from the Global Federation was immediate and unanimous. Yes. The encounter took place aboard the International Space Station Harmony, humanity's largest orbital facility. Sarah, Elena, and James were among the small group chosen to represent humanity in this historic meeting. As they waited in the station's largest conference module, Sarah felt the same mixture of excitement and terror she had experienced during those first days of contact. When Keeper Zaranine's shuttle approached the station, Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The craft was beautiful in an alien way. Organic curves that seemed to flow like water, surfaces that reflected light in impossible patterns, propulsion systems that left no visible exhaust trail. It was clearly the product of a civilization far beyond anything humanity had achieved. The airlock cycled, and humanity came face to face with their observer for the first time. Keeper Zaranine was humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shift color subtly in the light, for arms that moved with fluid grace, and eyes that held depths of intelligence and experience that made Sarah feel like a child. When the being spoke, the words came through a translation device that rendered the alien language into perfect, unaccented English. Greetings, representatives of humanity. I am honored to meet you in person after so many years of distant observation. Elena, as Director of Interspecies Communication, spoke for the group. Keeper Zaranine, the honor is ours. Your guidance has been invaluable in our preparation. The alien nodded, a gesture that seemed natural despite their obvious physical differences. I have watched your species grow and change over the past 27 years. The progress has been remarkable, though not unexpected. You have consistently demonstrated the capacity for evolution that first caught the attention of the Meridian Collective. James leaned forward slightly. Can you tell us anything more about what we'll face tomorrow? I am limited in what I can reveal without compromising the assessment's validity, Keeper Zaranine replied. However, I can tell you this. The trials are not designed to be impossible. They are designed to be revealing. The Quarantine Authority does not seek to trap developing species indefinitely. They seek to identify those ready for galactic citizenship. Sarah found herself studying the alien's expressive features, trying to read emotions in a face shaped by completely different evolutionary pressures. Are you optimistic about our chances? Keeper Zaranine was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah sensed careful consideration of the response. Your species has surprised me many times over the centuries. You have capacity for both great cruelty and great kindness, often within the same individuals. This complexity makes you difficult to predict, but it also makes you resilient and adaptable. The alien paused, then continued with what Sarah could only interpret as warmth in their voice. I have grown fond of humanity during my observation period. Your art moves me. Your music resonates with frequencies that touch something deep in my consciousness. Your literature explores questions that my own people faced millennia ago. I hope very much that you succeed tomorrow. Elena's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Thank you for believing in us. Belief is insufficient, Keeper 09 replied gently. Tomorrow, you must demonstrate that belief is justified. The universe is vast and full of wonders, but it is also dangerous. The quarantine protocols exist because species like the Devourers of Andromeda once spread unchecked, consuming entire star systems before they were stopped. The galaxy cannot afford to welcome another predator species. The weight of that statement settled over the human representatives like a shroud. They weren't just being tested for their own benefit. They were being evaluated as a potential threat to billions of other lives across the galaxy. Rest well tonight, Keeper 09 advised as the meeting concluded. Tomorrow, humanity faces its greatest test. The outcome will echo through the centuries, shaping not just your own destiny, but the destiny of every generation that follows. As the alien shuttle departed from the station, Sarah floated in the observation bay, watching it disappear among the stars. Tomorrow, everything would change. Either humanity would take its place among the galactic community, or they would remain forever confined to their solar system, left to wonder what might have been. The trial was about to begin, and there was no way to know if 27 years of preparation would be enough. The morning of the trial dawned clear and cold across Earth's surface. In the orbital facility that had become humanity's de facto embassy to the galaxy, Sarah Chun found herself unable to sleep past the early hours. She drifted through the corridors of Harmony Station, noting how quiet everything had become. Even the usual hum of life support systems seemed muted, as if the entire station was holding its breath. At precisely 0800 Greenwich Mean Time, every communication device in human space activated simultaneously. The message came not from Keeper 09, but from an entity that identified itself as Adjudicator Prime of the Quarantine Authority. Species Designation 7834, Sol. 3. You have requested evaluation under the Trial of Merit Protocols. Your assessment begins now. Present your designated representatives to the trial chamber. The trial chamber, it turned out, was not a physical location at all. Instead, humanity's representatives found themselves experiencing a form of consciousness transfer that defied every law of physics they understood. One moment Sarah was standing in the station's conference module alongside Elena, James, and 12 other chosen representatives. The next, she was elsewhere. The space around them was vast and indefinable, neither light nor dark, but something beyond both concepts. Surfaces existed where needed. Gravity flowed in directions that made sense despite their impossibility, and the very air seemed to shimmer with intelligence. Welcome to the assessment matrix. A voice spoke directly into their minds. The presence they felt was ancient, vast, and absolutely impartial. This was Adjudicator Prime, and Sarah understood immediately that they stood before something that had evaluated countless civilizations across millions of years. Your first trial begins now. You will be presented with a scenario that has no predetermined correct answer, only responses that reveal the true nature of your species' development. Remember, you are being evaluated not as individuals, but as representatives of humanity's collective consciousness. The space around them shifted, and suddenly, they stood on what appeared to be a planet's surface. The sky was green, the vegetation purple, and in the distance they could see a city that clearly belonged to an alien civilization. But something was wrong. Smoke rose from sections of the city, and they could hear sounds that might have been explosions or weapons fire. You are aboard a human exploration vessel that has just arrived in this system, Adjudicator Prime explained. Long-range scans indicate 2 intelligent species on this planet engaged in warfare. Species A is technologically inferior, but numerically superior. Species B is technologically advanced, but facing extinction. Both species have sent distress calls requesting assistance. Your ship has limited resources and can meaningfully aid only one species. Which do you choose, and why? Sarah felt her heart sink. This was exactly the kind of impossible choice that had no clear moral answer. Help the technologically inferior species, and they might enable genocide against the advanced civilization. Help the technologically advanced species, and they might be supporting an oppressive regime against freedom fighters. Elena stepped forward, her voice steady despite the magnitude of the moment. We need more information before making any decision. The scenario shifted, and suddenly, they found themselves with access to the complete history of the conflict. Species A, the Karathi, were indeed numerically superior, but lived in a pre-industrial society. They had been peaceful until Species B, the Zilani, had arrived from space 50 years earlier, claiming the planet contained resources essential for their survival. The Zilani had superior weapons and technology, but their own homeworld was dying, and they desperately needed the minerals found on this world. The conflict had escalated over decades. The Karathi wanted their planet back. The Zilani faced extinction without access to the resources. Both sides had committed atrocities. Both sides genuinely believed they were fighting for survival. We can't choose sides in this conflict, James said firmly. Both species have legitimate needs and grievances. Dr. Amara Okafor, speaking for the humanitarian perspective, added, "Our role should be to find a solution that serves both species, not to determine a winner." Explain your proposed solution, Adjudicator Prime commanded. Sarah found herself speaking for the group, drawing on 27 years of studying galactic civilization principles. We propose mediation. Our ship's resources should be used to establish a neutral zone and bring both species to the negotiating table. The Zilani clearly have advanced knowledge and technology. The Karathi have native knowledge of the planet and established communities. Instead of fighting over resources, they should be sharing knowledge and finding ways to coexist. And if they refuse mediation, the adjudicator pressed. Elena answered without hesitation. Then, we provide humanitarian aid to civilians on both sides while continuing to offer mediation services. We do not choose sides in conflicts where both parties have legitimate grievances. Even if your refusal to choose sides results in continued warfare and death, the question hung in the impossible space like a sword over their heads. Sarah could feel the weight of every human life throughout history, every decision that had led to their current moment. Yes, she said quietly. Even then, choosing sides in a complex conflict with incomplete information has historically led to worse outcomes than working persistently toward genuine resolution. We've learned this lesson through our own painful history. The scenario dissolved around them, and Adjudicator Prime's presence seemed to intensify. Your first trial is complete. Your species demonstrates understanding that cooperation requires patience, wisdom, and willingness to accept complexity rather than seeking simple solutions. This is encouraging. Sarah felt a moment of relief, but it was short-lived. The space around them shifted again, and they found themselves standing on the bridge of what was unmistakably a human spacecraft. Through the view screen, they could see Earth hanging in space, beautiful and blue and perfect. Your second trial begins now, Adjudicator Prime announced. Your homeworld is threatened by an approaching cosmic phenomenon, a gamma ray burst from a distant star that will sterilize all life on Earth in approximately 6 months. Your scientists have developed a theoretical shield technology that could protect the planet, but deploying it requires resources that would bankrupt your civilization and likely result in the collapse of your space program for centuries. Alternatively, you could use the same resources to evacuate a small percentage of your population to colony ships, preserving humanity, but abandoning Earth and the majority of your species. What do you choose? The scenario hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't about choosing between other species. This was about choosing between the survival of humanity's civilization and the survival of humanity's people. How many people could we evacuate? Dr. Chun Weiming asked, his philosophical training evident in the careful precision of the question. Approximately 2 million individuals. Your current population is 8 billion. The numbers were devastating. Save everyone and lose their future among the stars, or save their future by sacrificing 99% of their species. What's the confidence level on the shield technology? James inquired, his scientific background driving him toward technical details. 73% probability of success. Failure would result in total loss. No resources remaining for evacuation and no protection from the gamma-ray burst. Elena was studying the scenario parameters with the intensity she had once applied to alien linguistics. Are there any other options? Could we attempt a partial shield deployment combined with limited evacuation? Partial measures would result in failure of both approaches. You must choose one path or the other. Sarah looked around at her fellow representatives, seeing her own anguish reflected in their faces. This was the sacrifice trial, and it was asking them to choose between hope and survival, between the future and the present. We need to vote, Dr. Okafor said quietly. This decision is too important for any individual to make alone. But, as they prepared to take a vote that would determine humanity's response to its greatest crisis, Sarah realized something that changed everything. Wait, she said, holding up her hand. We're approaching this wrong. The trial isn't asking us to choose the optimal survival strategy. It's asking us to demonstrate the values that define our species. Elena's eyes widened with understanding. The sacrifice trial. It's not about what we sacrifice. It's about what we're willing to sacrifice for. James nodded slowly. And what we're not willing to sacrifice, no matter the cost. Sarah turned to address the adjudicator directly. We choose the shield technology. Even knowing the probability of failure? Even knowing that failure means the extinction of your species. Especially knowing that, Sarah replied firmly. The fundamental principle that defines human civilization is that we don't abandon each other. We've spent 27 years building a global society based on the idea that every human life has value. We're not going to abandon that principle now, even to save our species. Dr. Chun Weiming stepped forward, his voice carrying the weight of philosophical certainty. A humanity that could abandon 8 billion people to save 2 million wouldn't be humanity anymore. It would be something else, something that might survive in the stars, but wouldn't be worth saving. Elena added, if we succeed with the shield, we preserve both our people and our principles. If we fail as ourselves rather than succeeding as something we wouldn't recognize. And if your choice dooms your species to extinction? Adjudicator Prime pressed. Then, we face extinction as humans, James answered simply. Not as survivors who abandoned their humanity to survive. The scenario dissolved again, but this time Sarah felt a different quality to the adjudicator's presence. Something that might have been surprise, or perhaps approval. Your second trial is complete. Your species demonstrates the willingness to sacrifice survival itself to preserve the principles that define your identity. This is unexpected. Most species prioritize continuation over consistency. Sarah allowed herself another moment of relief, but she knew the hardest test was still ahead. The empathy trial, the test that would determine whether humanity could extend their moral consideration beyond their own species. Your final trial begins now, Adjudicator Prime announced, and the space around them shifted one last time. They found themselves in what appeared to be a laboratory or research facility. In the center of the room was a transparent containment chamber, and inside the chamber was something that made Sarah's stomach lurch with instinctive revulsion. The creature was unlike anything in Earth's evolutionary history. It was roughly humanoid, but wrong in every detail. Too many joints in its limbs, skin that seemed to shift and crawl, eyes that were too large and too knowing, appendages that might have been arms or tentacles or something altogether different. It was alien in the most fundamental sense, triggering every evolutionary fear response that humanity had developed over millions of years. This is a juvenile member of the Devourer species, Adjudicator Prime explained. The same species that once consumed entire star systems before being contained. This individual was captured as an infant and has never harmed another being. It has spent its entire life in captivity, studied by scientists trying to understand its species' predatory nature. It is, by any reasonable measure, innocent of its species' crimes. The creature in the chamber was looking at them with those unervingly large eyes, and Sarah could see what looked like intelligence there, maybe even pleading. The creature is dying from a genetic condition that affects its species. A cure exists, but The resources required to treat this single individual could instead be used to provide medical care for approximately 10,000 members of less threatening species currently suffering from treatable diseases. Additionally, curing this individual would require releasing advanced medical technology that the creature's species could potentially access and misuse. Sarah felt her heart breaking as she understood the choice they faced. Save the innocent individual who happened to belong to a dangerous species, or save thousands of innocents from safer species. What do you choose? Adjudicator Prime asked, and Sarah knew this was the question upon which humanity's entire future hinged. Sarah stared at the creature in the containment chamber, her mind racing through every ethical framework she had ever studied. Around her, the other human representatives struggled with the same impossible choice. The empathy trial was asking them to look beyond their instinctive fears and prejudices to make a moral decision that would define humanity's character. Elena broke the heavy silence first. Can we speak with the creature? Can we understand what it wants? The individual possesses intelligence equivalent to your own species, Adjudicator Prime responded. Communication is possible through the translation matrix. A soft harmonic tone filled the chamber, and suddenly, they could hear a voice that was neither male nor female, neither old nor young, but carried a quality of profound sadness. Please, the creature said, and the single word contained depths of longing that made Sarah's chest tighten. I know what my people did. I have lived my entire existence knowing that my very existence terrifies others. I do not ask for freedom. I do not ask to join the galaxy. I ask only to live long enough to prove that not all of my kind need to be monsters. Dr. Amara Okafor stepped closer to the containment chamber, her humanitarian instincts overriding her evolutionary programming. What would you do if you were cured? If you could live? I would study, the creature replied, its multiple appendages pressing against the transparent wall. I would learn why my species became what it did. I would try to find ways to prevent others of my kind from following the path of consumption and destruction. I would spend whatever years I have trying to atone for crimes I never committed but cannot escape. James was studying the technical readouts associated with the containment chamber. How long have you been here? 47 of your years. I was taken when I was very young, during the final containment operation against my people's fleet. The scientists here have been kind, within the limitations of their security requirements. They have taught me languages, mathematics, history. I know what my people did to the Centauri colonies, to the mining worlds of Vega, to the research stations in the Orion sector. The creature's voice carried a weight of grief that transcended species boundaries. Billions died because of my people's hunger. I cannot bring them back. I cannot undo the damage. But perhaps I can ensure that if my species ever encounters other civilizations again, the outcome might be different. Sarah found herself looking not at a monster, but at an individual trapped by the crimes of their species, desperately trying to find meaning in a life defined by others' atrocities. It was a situation she understood all too well from human history. You're asking us to choose between saving you and saving thousands of others, Elena said gently. No, the creature replied, its large eyes focused on her with startling intensity. I am asking you to choose what kind of species you wish to become. The galaxy will remember how you treat the innocent child of your enemies. That memory will shape how they treat you for centuries to come. The statement hit the human representatives like a thunderbolt. This wasn't just about one life versus thousands. It was about establishing precedent for how humanity would be perceived by galactic civilization. Dr. Chen Weiming turned away from the containment chamber to address his colleagues. We're not just being tested on empathy. We're being tested on justice, on our ability to separate the individual from the group, on our understanding of what it means to be truly civilized. But the practical considerations are real, James argued, his scientific training making him focus on the numbers. 10,000 lives versus one. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Do they? Sarah asked quietly. Or does the protection of the few from the tyranny of the many define the difference between civilization and barbarism? Elena was studying the scenario parameters with the same intensity she had once brought to decoding alien languages. Adjudicator Prime, you said this individual has never harmed another being. What about its species' predatory instincts? Are they learned behaviors or biological imperatives? Current research suggests a combination of both factors, the adjudicator replied. The predatory behaviors can be controlled through education and social conditioning, but the underlying drives remain. However, this individual has shown remarkable success in suppressing those drives through what your species would term meditation and philosophical study. Sarah made a decision that felt like stepping off a cliff. We cure the creature, even knowing the cost in other lives. Adjudicator Prime pressed. Especially knowing the cost, Sarah replied firmly. Because the cost of not curing this individual, the cost of allowing prejudice and fear to override justice and compassion, is far higher than the immediate humanitarian price. Elena stepped forward to support her colleague. Humanity has learned, through our own painful history, that judging individuals by the crimes of their group leads only to perpetual cycles of revenge and oppression. We cannot ask the galaxy to judge us as individuals while simultaneously refusing to extend that same consideration to others. Dr. Okafor nodded emphatically. And the precedent we establish here will echo through every future interaction between species. If we allow fear to override justice when the stakes are highest, we demonstrate that our principles are conditional rather than fundamental. James, despite his initial focus on the numbers, found himself agreeing. The creature has spent 47 years demonstrating that individuals can transcend their species' worst tendencies. That's exactly what we're asking the galaxy to believe about humanity. The creature in the containment chamber had been listening to their discussion, and now it spoke again with a voice thick with emotion. If you choose to save me, I swear by whatever you consider sacred that I will spend every day of my extended life working to justify your faith in individual redemption over group condemnation. Dr. Chen Weiming turned to the adjudicator. We understand the cost. We understand the risk. But we also understand that some principles are worth maintaining even when they're expensive. We choose to cure the devourer child. The scenario dissolved around them, and they found themselves back in the infinite space of the assessment matrix. Adjudicator Prime's presence felt different now, less impartial, more engaged. Your trials are complete, the ancient voice announced. Your species has demonstrated cooperation without sacrificing principle, sacrifice without abandoning identity, and empathy without compromising justice. These are the hallmarks of civilizations ready for galactic citizenship. Sarah felt her knees go weak with relief, but the adjudicator continued. However, your assessment period is not concluded. The trials test your current state of development. True citizenship requires proof that you can maintain these standards under pressure, over time, and across generations. You are granted provisional citizenship, with full evaluation to be conducted after 100 standard galactic years of observation. Elena found her voice first. What does provisional citizenship mean for humanity? The quarantine barriers around your solar system will be modified to allow limited expansion. You may establish colonies in nearby uninhabited systems. You may engage in trade and cultural exchange with other civilizations. You will be assigned a mentor species to guide your integration into galactic society. Most importantly, you will be given the opportunity to prove that your trial performance reflects genuine evolution rather than temporary behavior modification. The consciousness transfer reversed, and, suddenly, they were back aboard Harmony Station. Sarah looked around at her colleagues, seeing the same mixture of relief, exhaustion, and determination in their faces that she felt in her own heart. 100 years, James said quietly. 100 years to prove we meant everything we said in there. Elena was already thinking ahead. We need to contact Earth immediately. The Global Federation needs to know that everything we've built over the past 27 years was just the beginning. But Sarah found herself thinking about something else entirely. What happens to the devourer child? The one in the scenario. As if summoned by her question, Keeper Zaranine's voice came through the station's communication system. Dr. Chun, your concern for the individual in your empathy trial has been noted by the Quarantine Authority. The scenario was based on an actual case currently under review by the Galactic Ethics Council. Your species' recommendation will be forwarded to the relevant authorities. Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. Even in a simulated scenario, their choices had real consequences. The empathy they had shown might actually save a life. Keepers are a 9. Elena called out. What happens now? What does provisional citizenship look like? Your species will be assigned to the Meridian Collective for mentoring and integration. I have requested to continue as your primary liaison, a request that has been approved by both the Quarantine Authority and my own people. The next century will be challenging, but I believe humanity has the potential to become one of the galaxy's most valued civilizations. Over the following months, the quarantine barriers were indeed modified. The first human exploration ship crossed the boundary of the solar system 6 months after the trial, carrying with it the hopes and dreams of an entire species. Colony ships followed, establishing humanity's first interstellar settlements in systems carefully chosen for their lack of existing inhabitants. Trade delegations arrived from distant worlds, bringing technologies and knowledge that had previously been beyond human comprehension. Cultural exchange programs introduced human art, music, and literature to galactic civilization while exposing humanity to wonders they had never imagined. But, perhaps most importantly, humanity began to encounter other species facing their own challenges and struggles. When the Korathi-Zalani conflict was presented to the newly formed Interspecies Mediation Council, with human representatives serving alongside beings from across the galaxy, Sarah wasn't surprised to find themselves applying the same principles they had demonstrated in their trial. Years turned to decades, and decades approached the century mark of humanity's provisional period. The changes were remarkable. War between human nations became not just uncommon, but genuinely unthinkable. Poverty, disease, and environmental degradation were eliminated through the application of principles learned from galactic civilization. Most remarkably, humanity became known throughout their local galactic sector as advocates for the rights of individuals against the prejudices of their species. Dr. Sarah Chun, now in her 90s and serving as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, often reflected on that Tuesday morning so long ago when the first alien signal had been detected. The frightened, divided, warlike species that had received that transmission no longer existed. In its place stood something new, not perfect, but genuinely committed to being better than they had been. The final evaluation came, as promised, exactly 100 years after humanity's trial. This time, there were no dramatic tests or impossible scenarios. Instead, galactic observers reviewed a century of human behavior, examining how they had treated their own people, their new neighbors, and even their former enemies. The verdict, when it came, was unanimous. Humanity was granted full galactic citizenship, with all the rights, responsibilities, and opportunities that status entailed. At the celebration ceremony held aboard a space station orbiting Earth, representatives from 47 different species gathered to welcome humanity officially into the galactic community. Keepers Uranine, now an old friend rather than a distant observer, gave the keynote address. When I first began observing Sol 3, I witnessed a species balanced on the knife's edge between greatness and destruction. Today, I stand before a civilization that has chosen greatness not once, but consistently across generations. Humanity has proven that evolution is possible, that species can grow beyond their origins, and that the choices we make define not just who we are, but who we can become. Sarah, representing humanity in the response, looked out at the assembled representatives of galactic civilization and thought about all the paths that had led to this moment. The fear, the hope, the impossible choices, and the determination to be worthy of the trust placed in them. The galaxy warned us that humanity was fragile, she said, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems to every being present. They were right. We are fragile, but fragility is not weakness. Fragility is what makes us careful with precious things. It's what makes us protect what matters. And it's what makes us grateful for every opportunity to prove that we deserve to be here, among the stars, among friends. As the ceremony concluded and the assembled beings began to mingle, sharing stories and dreams and plans for the future, Sarah found herself looking out at the stars through the station's massive viewports. Somewhere out there, on worlds circling distant suns, other species were beginning their own journeys toward the stars. Some would succeed, some would fail, Some would face the same terrible choices humanity had confronted. But now, when those species reached the point where they needed guidance, they would find humanity waiting to help them navigate the challenges ahead. The fragile species from Sol 3 had become the mentors they had once needed themselves. The warning had been issued. The test had been passed. The future was just beginning.